Okay, my friends, I want to talk about some myths of economics. Now that you've been studying econ for a little while, I want to walk you through some things that you might have heard from other people, but that I don't actually think are true. And some of these are my opinion, but I think most of these are real. I have 20 myths. Now, I should mention really quick as we get into this, these are not the kinds of things you'll typically see on a test. Some of them are related to things that you'll see on a test, but most of these are things that they're more the culture of econ. They're more like the way that economists work. So by all means, take notes, but don't feel like you've got to copy everything. Copy the stuff that's most important to you. And I think what you'll find is that you're going to see this a lot, not just in my class, but just kind of throughout any time that you spend with economics generally. Okay, let's dive in. Don't worry about these 20. We'll do them one by one. Number one, this is one that I hear sometimes. Economics will lead you away from God. There is no economics in heaven. Be careful if you're a religious person, because religious people need to be wary of economics. Well, I'm going to tell you the parable of the screwdriver. I want you to imagine that you have a hole in your wall. And in order to fix the hole in your wall, you need to get out your saw and cut out a little section of your wall and put in some new drywall. And you pull out your screwdriver and you go, "Screwdriver, why aren't you a saw?" Now that would be silly, right? I hope all of you recognize that that would be really silly. But we do that a lot with economics, where we say, well, economics doesn't make me more spiritual. Yes, that's because that's the role of religion. That is not the role of economics. That we have a field that is supposed to do that. That's the role of ethics or morality or a lot of other things. The purpose of economics is to answer economic questions. And the economic questions involve things like, do people have access to food? Do they have access to resources? Do they have leisure time? And what do they spend it on? And so I want to really stress this. If you think economics is not making you a better person, maybe you should ask, is that what the tool is intended for? So in the first place, I don't think you can do economics well without also saying, how am I going to do personal morality and building myself spiritually and all of those things? But let me answer in a different way as well. I had genuinely spiritual experiences in my first economics class, and I think it's because economics is a pursuit of truth. Now, economics is not going to tell me how to be a good neighbor. It's not going to tell me all of those things. But the pursuit of truth makes you better in every aspect of your life. And I think that that's really, really important. So one of the things that I've heard is, in heaven there will not be any economics, because economics is all about scarcity. And there's not going to be scarcity in heaven. Well, I'm not so sure about that. But let me put it this way. Economics is about two things. There is scarcity, but also the scarcity is that there isn't enough to meet our desires. And I actually think that this is really important. I think that our desires are infinite, and that is God-given. That there will never be a time when I am a good enough dad. That there will never be a time when I am an effective enough citizen. There will never be a time when I've finished my teaching and I have no way to improve in the way that I am teaching. That we are driven to become better in every single instance. And so I really want to emphasize this idea. Yes, there is no scarcity in heaven, but there is an infinity of how much I desire to improve, and I don't think that will go away. By the way, I have to shout out my homie, Captain Jean-Luc Picard, played by Patrick Stewart. He was one of my heroes growing up. And what he says is, so this is from Star Trek, in which there is no money. And what he says is, the acquisition of wealth is no longer the driving force in our lives. We work to better ourselves and the rest of humanity. Economics will apply just as much when that is our driving force as it does right now. Let me just see if I can say it like this. I think whenever we learn truth, the Spirit is there. I hope you have spiritual experiences. I also hope that you recognize that if you want to become a better person, that's not the saw, that's not the screwdriver, that's you. And that's something that you've got to figure out. Number two, one of the things that I hear all the time is economists focus on numbers, not people. And I will do this in class, but I don't mind repeating myself. I want you to look really quick at that map. And you might notice, some of you might know where I am talking about. I feel very strongly about this map. Perhaps a better picture. By the way, go ahead and pause it and see if you can tell what I am pointing out. What is this? What are we looking at here? And what's going on here is also going on here. So I want you to imagine this imaginary line in the sand. And on one side, people are prosperous and mostly free. And on the other side, people are neither prosperous nor free. I don't mean to be unkind, I very much love the people of North Korea, but I have serious frustrations with the government of North Korea. And I think it's okay to say that. You can see that there's no light emanating from the country because of their lack of development. They are the same people. They are the same country 50 years ago. They are the same landmass with the same natural resources. And people always like to use those as the reason why people are prosperous or not. Well, they have a lot of wealth. They have oil. They have this. They have that. But North Korea and South Korea is great because it's such a clear example of the fact that the difference between the two is policy. And the reason why I get so excited about talking about economics is because it's the best way to make a difference for large numbers of people very, very quickly, is understanding policy. The imaginary line is literally the difference between wealth on one side and poverty on the other. And one of my favorite quotes is by Bob Lucas, an economist. He said the concept, so he's talking about all of this stuff and he talks, somebody kind of talks about how, well, interest rates are just numbers and GDP is just numbers. And, they're kind of making fun of how economists are so focused on numbers. The consequences for human welfare involved in questions like these are simply staggering. Once one starts to think about them, it is hard to think about anything else. I need to emphasize just how big of a deal this is. I care about economics because it uses numbers to benefit people. And you're welcome to say that life is more than GDP. If your GDP is one of the lowest in the world, I guarantee you your daily life is dominated by the fact that your GDP is low. And so I take issue when people say, well, you just care about numbers, not people. Not at all. We care about people and we use numbers to accelerate their well-being as best we know how. Number 3, economists are obsessed with money. Well, as it turns out, I have a very different take. I love what Tim Harford said. Economics spreads happiness. I like that because that's how I feel about economics. I think it's just so fun. But let me give you a little bit more of a precise explanation of what I'm going for. Oh no, the picture is in the wrong spot. Oh, that's too bad. The truth is that economists are obsessed with happiness. We base ourselves on utilitarianism, which literally has the word utility in it. And utility is just another word for satisfaction, happiness, joy. I think it is very, very important that we understand that we use money to measure real people's happiness, joy, fulfillment, welfare. And if you want to learn more about money, by all means, take an accounting class. That's not what we study. We are in the social sciences. We care about understanding people and the things they go through. I love F.A. Hayek here. Money is certainly too dangerous an instrument to leave to the fortuitous expediency of politicians. So maybe in the first place, we should be a little bit careful to say, just money. Well, when you don't have any, money becomes very important. I don't think we should just money anything. I think I have another quote here. Oh yeah, this is great. Here's an example of a bunch of numbers that I think matter a lot. This is countries according to the World Happiness Index and GDP per capita. There are not a lot of relationships that are this strong in all of international affairs. And one of the ones that we know that is actually quite strong is this. Countries that are wealthy tend to be much happier. And so if you want to go down here and live in this space for a little while and then come back and talk to me and say, well, there's more to life than just being wealthy and happy. You're right. But money does really equal happiness in a lot of ways. And when you are starving, you are not nearly as happy. And I think that that's worth talking about more. Now, we're going to talk in just a second about, well, in fact, I think it might be here. There it is. At the beginning, when you have a little bit of money, oh man, when you have only a little and you get a little bit more, you are thrilled. And then when you get a little bit more, you are more thrilled and more thrilled and more thrilled. But it starts to be worth less and less to you as you get about to $200,000 a year, where it's fine, you're not going to say no, but you're not really that much better off. And I think this is a really important idea too, because economists are the ones who figured out money ain't everything, right? I hope that all of you are making lots and lots of money. Your happiness does not improve much statistically over about $200,000 a year. By the way, this was from 2015, so by now, inflation, maybe it's 250, right? Or something like that. And by the way, I have my own opinion. I think that you are still happier. You just have to get a lot more money for it to be able to show. I think it's on a log scale, for those of you who know what that means. I think it's economists who are studying this. Let me just give you one. Oh, no. It's later on, so we'll go on to that in a minute. Fine, but y'all are like super focused on finance. Yeah, so when I was in college, I remember somebody said, what are you studying? And I said, economics. And they said, oh yeah, my brother's in the business school. I said, what's he studying? He said, well, finance. I said, cool. What does that have to do with economics? He said, well, it's all about money. And I was like, no, we are different. So this is, let me just show you really quick. This is Angus Deaton. He studied death, the economics of death. This is Eric Hanushek. He studies the economics of education. This is, oh shoot, what's her name? Oh, now I'm embarrassed. She does the economics of pregnancy, which is really cool. I will find her later. She has a bunch of parenting books that are really cool. Let me see if I can remember her. This is Jennifer Doliak. I remember Jennifer. I follow her on Twitter. She does the economics of crime. This is, now I'm forgetting all the names. I should have reviewed this before I started. Harvard. No, I can't remember his name. He does the economics of discrimination and investigated, do white police officers shoot black men more often? Got in a whole puddle of controversy because he said some pretty uncomfortable things. Roland Fryer Jr. There we go. That's his name. Still can't remember her name. Dang it. I'll look it up. Hold on. 1 second. I'll pause and come back. That's what it is. Emily Oster. How can I forget Emily Oster? She's great. Let's see. Jennifer Doliak, Roland Fryer Jr. This is the Freakonomics guy. This is Steve Levitt, and he studies all of the things from drug dealers and why drug dealers are supposedly making lots of money but are actually living with their mom because they're poor, and sumo wrestlers, which is also really cool, and the economics of names. This is Raj Chetty, who homeboy studies the economics of everything. Like, he's all about like income inequality, crime. He's done some education stuff. And this is Adam Smith, who, and I have to say this, started as a moral philosopher who wanted to figure out what a moral life was and what the good life was. This notion that economists only focus on finance is not accurate, and I think ultimately can be really damaging. Economics right now is a field that can study anything because they have tools and they have a mindset that we can study anything and we can do a really good job. And so I want all of you to understand, if you are into finance, oh, you're going to love this class. If you're into other things, you're still going to love this class, and there's a lot here for you. Okay. Efficiency over people. I hear this a lot. Well, all you economists, all you care about is economic efficiency. I want to help you understand that efficiency is an effect on people. When you think about terrible, grinding poverty, that is economic inefficiency. And when you think about abundance and the good life and having plenty, that is a lot of economic efficiency. So when people say, well, all you care about is, whoa, 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 what we care about is people, and we use economic tools to try to answer those questions. Efficiency is a measure of people's well-being, or I should say, economic efficiency will lead to people's well-being faster in economic affairs and matters, especially when it comes to starvation and not having enough. Economics ignores complexity. Let me show you Bill Dibble. I hear this one a lot. Well, in economics, we always say, let's imagine that everybody's rational. And that's not true. People aren't rational. Well, let me give you my opinion on this. Bill Dibble was my science teacher at BYU when I was an undergrad there. And one day he was setting up a cool experiment with what do you call them? The big giant slinkies, right? Coils of wire. And it was to do with destructive interference and constructive interference. And one of my buddies raised his hand and said, so professor, should we assume no friction? And Bill Dibble goes, yeah, that's right. And he goes, so what's even the point? All of this physics doesn't matter much if we always have to assume no friction, and just kind of, just challenging him a little bit. And I remember listening to this and I go, ooh, juicy question. So I lean forward, wondering what is he going to say. And Dr. Dibble just looks up at the kid like he's an idiot, just like he's daft. And goes, you do realize the bomb worked, right? And then he just goes right back to setting up. I thought he was going to be like, well, there's a good reason. He didn't do any of that. He immediately just dismissed it and said, yes, our science is imperfect, but the bomb worked. He was referring to the atomic bomb. He was talking about how our science actually makes things different about the world. By the way, I'm not sure that the bomb is actually a good thing for society or not. That's a different ethical question. But for people to say, well, what good is science anyway? Because we have to make certain assumptions, that reflects their misunderstanding of the science. And by the way, we ignore friction in economics all the time. We assume rationality, we assume other things. So do the scientists. The bombs work, and we know a lot about economics. And so both of those things are true. Good teaching sometimes means that we simplify. That doesn't mean that we don't understand the complexity. Okay? Economists assume everyone is rational. Well, kind of, yeah. That is something that we will talk about. Let me frame this in the way that I like to say it. Economists believe that there's something right with people. If you want to say that there's something wrong with people, that's just fine. Head over to the Ricks building, and my friends in sociology or maybe in psychology, they can hook you up. But in economics, we assume that there's something right with people, that they know what they are doing and that they are good people. They have thought through things, that they are trying to figure out the best possible life for themselves. And that is the foundational assumption in economics. And by the way, I think that that is true. I think that is true on average. I think that is overwhelmingly true. There are people who are not rational. They are on the fringes. There are not very many of them. The way that I would say this is if I walk up to you and I say, I have two hands, this one has $20, this has none, there are no strings, which one would you like? And I run this experiment 1,000 times. I think overwhelmingly people are going to pick the $20. That isn't because they're evil or selfish or greedy. It's because they are smart. It's because they are rational and because they know that one is better than the other and they're going to do what's best for them and their family. I love what Milton Friedman said about this. Actually, let me just see. No, it is this one. Self-interest is not myopic selfishness. It is whatever it is that interests the participants, whatever they value, whatever goals they pursue. The scientist seeking to advance the frontiers of his discipline, the missionary seeking to convert infidels to the true faith, the philanthropist seeking to bring comfort to the needy. They are all pursuing their interests as they see them, as they judge them by their own values. When we say that people are rational and self-interested, that doesn't mean that they only care about themselves or are materialistic. It means that they care about certain things and are going to take steps to pursue what the world needs to be in order to give them those things. Number 8, I always hear economists focus too much on GDP. And I'm going to be the first one to say the biggest critiques, the best critiques I've seen of GDP come from economists who are saying maybe GDP is a little overdone. GDP, by the way, is a measure of how much the economy makes. It's more of a macro term, but it is a really, really relevant question and something that we should talk about. Down here it says, economists typically think that your happiness goes up as you get more money, but the more you have, the less each additional dollar means. This means that you value money most in times when you have less income and more expenses. By the way, that's Emily Oster, who I forgot the name of earlier. Emily Oster is pointing out something, which is for each dollar you get, each dollar means just a little tiny bit less until you have enough. And I think that's actually really, really important. We recognize that very deeply. The good life is not just money, but money is a big part of having the good life. By the way, now is a really good time to mention that it was Easterlin who figured out that there's a point at which wealth and happiness goes straight up together in countries, and then there's a point at which it plateaus. Wealthier countries tend to be happier up to a point. And then more and more wealth not only doesn't seem to make a difference, but can actually in some cases make people less happy, less fulfilled. I find that incredibly compelling, and that's called the Easterlin paradox. And this is something that we talk about in economics because it's fascinating. By the way, I should also mention, I think it was the president of Bhutan or the king of Bhutan, who recently announced that he wanted to create something called gross national happiness. And he thinks that it's more important that we focus on what are the different parts of all of these different, what are the subcomponents of genuine happiness in a country. I think that is a really, really relevant and important question. And it's economists, by the way, some of my favorite economists are happiness economists. Arthur Brooks is one of them. We will talk a lot about how to help people be happy, this kind of intersection between economics and psychology. Economics has few real-world applications. This is really easy. Give it like a day. You will have lots of applications just from economics class, I promise. If not, come and get your money back, and I'll make you that bet. Number 10, I heard you guys are located over there in the business school. Well, at BYU Idaho, we might well be. I'm not sure where we're located because I teach up in education. When I was at BYU, I know that they were separate, and that was a very deliberate choice because they explained it to me on day one. We're not in the business school. We don't want to be in the business school. We are in the School of Social Sciences. And in fact, I would argue that we are in the School of Social Sciences. We're the snootiest member of the School of Social Sciences. But we study people. We don't study money. If you want to become rich, I've got some tools that will help you. But fundamentally, that's not what it's about. What it's about is human flourishing. And I think that that is really, really important. So if you want to talk to me, I think that we should be located in the Ricks where we study the social sciences. Or at BYU, you can see the Swicket back there in the background. That's where I took some of my first classes. And I think it's the JSB is the big one. JFSB? I can't remember. I'm getting them all confused now. But the big building, certainly they're right in the middle that has the big courtyard in it. Okay. I love what Jim Stanford said. Economics is a social science, not a physical science. And what that means is we need to be humble about what we come up with because it's not like physics, it's not like biology. But we also need to recognize that we are focused primarily on people, not on atoms or automatons. Okay, number 11. We talk about bets a lot because money. We care about money. Pacini, you keep saying you don't care about money, but I know you do because you keep talking about bets. Well, no, that's a little bit different. The reason we talk about bets is probably best explained by this little guy right here. This is a cartoon avatar of one of my favorite economists. His name is Bryan Caplan. He blogs, he writes, he's got a bunch of books. He's just a fun guy to listen to. And if you look, you'll notice that on his shield, he's got a supply and demand graph with wages and labor on it, which is actually kind of cool. Bryan Caplan is just a cool guy who's a clever thinker, and his blog is called Bet on It. So there's him with his boys, and if you can see right there, that's the name of it. The reason why he says bet on it is very simple, and that's because people lie, and they don't lie nearly as often when you say, do you want to bet? How much do you want to bet? In economics, we call this revealed preferences. If I ask you, do you value apples or pears more? It's actually very difficult to figure out whether you're telling the truth. And sometimes you don't even know yourself. But when I can see your receipts from Walmart, I can tell very quickly and very easily whether you like apples or pears or oranges or whatever else faster. You have revealed your preferences through your actions. Actions speak louder than words, and that is why economists, we are disagreeable. We don't trust people. We want to see what happens when their money is where their mouth is. Okay? Talk is cheap. People only tell the truth when there's a cost attached. Number 12. Again, economics is the language of business. Well, no. I don't think that that's true. I think a better way to say it is that economics is the language of policy. If you go into public policy, if you go into an MPA, an MBA, all of these will require you to take economics classes because it's a way of thinking that will benefit you. If you want to do well in business, I have a lot to offer you. But fundamentally, that's not quite the way that I would say it. Accounting is the language of business, and economics will give you something useful to say. A friend, somebody very close to me, I asked him, I said, if I want to make $1 million, should I be a business major? And he said, well, they'll teach you the language, but they may not give you much to say. And I think that's a really interesting question. What do you have to bring if you can speak the language of accounting perfectly? If you want to start a business, you need to know how people work, how they think, how they act, what trade-offs they're willing to make. That is the key. By the way, I have to shout out my homie, Thomas Sowell. Sold? I think he goes by Soul. Economic policies need to be analyzed in terms of the incentives they create rather than the hopes that inspired them. This is a classic rule of economics. We do not look at how much you hope that something achieved. We measure something based on the actual effects of what is measured. And that is a good rule, not just for economics, but for all of policymaking. One other good one, because Soul is just great. The first lesson of economics is scarcity. There's never enough of anything to satisfy all those who want it. The first lesson of politics is to disregard the first lesson of economics. Number 13, economics is fancy math. Well, no. Let me quote Milton Friedman. Economics has become increasingly an arcane branch of mathematics rather than dealing with real economic problems. So first of all, economists are the ones saying, hold up, no, math is not economics. And we should not pretend that doing fancy math is enough to be a good economist. Here's what I will say, though. Oh, I love this. Robert Heilbronner, he said, mathematics has given economics rigor, but alas, also mortis. This is a joke about rigor mortis. When you die and you tense up, that's that rigor mortis that you have. I hope that we are more than just fancy schmancy mathematicians. I think that rigor is very important, and we all feel that way. But for basic economics, well, first of all, let me say this. Some of the best critiques of quantitative economics comes from those same economists. Second of all, for this class, for Econ 150, the only math you need is middle school math. Now, you need to be fluent in it. You need to be able to say 8 times 6. You should know 6 times 8 is 48 without having to think about it very much. And I can give you about 3 seconds before I should be able to hear that back. You should be able to know the area of a triangle. You should be able to figure out how to graph things on a graph. These are things that you should be able to do very, very easily. If you can, you are going to be just fine. And then after that, I just want to mention, beyond Econ 150 and maybe 151, there is just no way to communicate the beauty of economics without the elegance of calculus. And you don't need a lot of calculus, but a little bit of calculus will allow you to speak economics with a beautiful accent. How about we say it like that? Number 14, economists must have good stock tips. Well, I hope you can already tell that I'm not big on economists as finance, right? But here's one that's actually a little bit right, okay? I do actually have some good stock tips for 99% of you. And here they are. Spend less than you earn. Invest that money in the long term. And 99% of you, you should just invest in the economy broadly. You should not pick your favorite stocks. You should not think a lot about, well, was this company going to go well? Or maybe that one's going to go well, because you don't have enough information. And neither do I. So yes, here's my stock tip. Spend less than you earn. Invest for the long run. Don't get scared and pull your money out. And for most of you, you should just invest in the overall economy with something that a lot of people have called a Vanguard bond or an index fund. But the 1% of you, you're going to do this. You're going to go and work at the New York Stock Exchange or a different stock exchange. And you're going to know that a new CEO was just hired by this company and he's fantastic. That business is about to do really well because I am not betting on the horse. I'm betting on the jockey. And you can make a lot of money, but that's because you are dedicating your entire life to that. Unless you are on that floor and doing those things, picking stocks is as much gambling as playing at a poker table. And so I would recommend, if it is a gamble, you're probably not doing it right. You're not going to get big payoffs. If, on the other hand, you are betting on the economy, you are sure to do well, and you are sure to have a lot less downside risk. So those are my stock tips, and that is the last time we will likely talk about the stock market in a microeconomics class. You want to know what economics is really about? I love this from John Kenneth Galbraith. Economics is extremely useful as a form of employment for economists. Number 15, economists believe people are selfish. Truth. We believe that people optimize, and we propose doing something about it. This one is so important that I actually need to show you a quick film, a quick video. So Michael Moore is kind of a left-leaning critic of capitalism, and you'll hear this a lot of economics and capitalists. Quote, capitalism is an organized system to guarantee that greed becomes the primary force of our economic system and allows the few of us at the top to get very wealthy, and has the rest of us riding around thinking we can be that way too. If we just work hard enough, sell enough Tupperware and Amway products, we too can get a pink Cadillac. By the way, I'm not a big fan of pyramid schemes. And I recognize that the materialism he's talking about does sometimes happen in free markets. The question is, does it happen anywhere else? I am going to now pull up let's see, Greed, Milton Friedman. I was going to read it to you, but I think it's actually more effective if I just show it to you. So let's make sure that you can hear. Let me make sure that you're going to be able to hear this real quick. 1 second. Okay, this should work. Let's just see if it does. I think it will.
When you sit in your study and throughout your career as a professor, you've met students and you've probably dealt with every kind of question, stupid through. I guess I want to know whether you've ever been tempted to become politically revolutionary. Here's my question. When you see around the globe the maldistribution of wealth, the desperate plight of millions of people in underdeveloped countries, when you see so few haves and so many have-nots, when you see the greed and the concentration of power within, did you ever have a moment of doubt about capitalism and whether greed's a good idea to run on?
Well, first of all, tell me, is there some society you know that doesn't run on greed? You think Russia doesn't run on greed? You think China doesn't run on greed? What is greed? Of course, none of us are greedy. It's only the other fellow who's greedy. The world runs on individuals pursuing their separate interests. The great achievements of civilization have not come from government bureaus. Einstein didn't construct his theory under order from a bureaucrat. Henry Ford didn't revolutionize the automobile industry that way. In the only cases in which the masses have escaped from the kind of grinding poverty you're talking about, the only cases in recorded history are where they have had capitalism and largely free trade. If you want to know where the masses are worst off, it's exactly in the kinds of societies that depart from that. So that the record of history is absolutely crystal clear that there is no alternative way so far discovered of improving the lot of the ordinary people that can hold a candle to the productive activities that are unleashed by a free enterprise system.
But it seems to reward not virtue as much as ability to manipulate the system.
And what does reward virtue? You think the communist commissar rewards virtue? You think a Hitler rewards virtue? You think, excuse me, if you'll pardon me, do you think American presidents reward virtue? Do they choose their appointees on the basis of the virtue of the people appointed or on the basis of their political clout? Is it really true that political self-interest is nobler somehow than economic self-interest? You know, I think you're taking a lot of things for granted. And just tell me where in the world you find these angels who are going to organize society for us. Well, I don't even trust you to do that.
Milton Friedman gets into his own personal political philosophy here, and you don't need to agree with free markets in order to be a good economist. There are certainly plenty who would disagree with him. But I think most economists, mainline economists, would agree that saying that personal self-interest is the same as greed leaves a lot to be debated. And here's the way that he stipulates this. If you're going to say that free markets are greedy, that might well be the case. And do you think political markets are not? Do you think that political bureaucracies don't have the same motivation? Here's the way that I would say it. The way that I would say it is everyone is selfish. The universe can confirm this. We all want more for ourselves. We are all rational. We are all optimizers. The difference is that economists have proposed that we do something about it. And the way that they propose that is that in a market, if you want to be better off, you have a couple of choices. You can steal, you can break the rules, you can hurt other people, but all of those are outside the system. Inside of the system, the only way that you make yourself better off is by also making somebody else better off. And I think that's a darn good system that makes a whole lot of moral and economic and rational sense to me. So that's just the quote that we just listened to just a moment ago. Okay. And I put the video on, so I guess I didn't need to go and find it. Economics will make you better at business. Well, I certainly hope so. But the truth here is that economics will make you better at life. And you can't possibly be good at business without knowing a little bit of economics. This is by Tyler Cowen. He podcasts. He's another one of my favorite economists. Economics is everywhere, and understanding economics can help you make better decisions and lead a happier life. The goal of my class is not that you all go and make money, though I certainly want you to be able to do that too. I think economics will make you a better person, a better disciple. I think it will make you genuinely into something more than you are today. And that's because economics at its best is simply good thinking and clear thinking based on data. Okay, Charles Whelan. Economics is like gravity. Ignore it and you will be in for some rude surprises. There are such things as laws, like laws of gravity and laws of supply and laws of demand. And when we ignore them, we do so at our own peril. 17, economists have all the answers. Well, this one's a little bit true. No, not really. I love what Harry Truman said. Give me a one-handed economist. All my economists say, well, on the one hand, on the other, a good economist is actually not going to give you all the answers. My dad would do this when I was a kid. He would say, now, son, I want you to think about this. And I would be like, okay, I'm going to do it that way. And immediately he would say, well, no, hold on. Now, I don't think you've thought about this. And he would always go back and forth. And his goal was not to say you should. His goal was to say, when you are thinking about what you should do, you should consider all of these variables. And that's what economists are really good at. Now, the good news is the lens of economics can provide insight in any domain. And I find this over and over and over again. I think that's true of business and arts and lots of other things. I have to because it's Murray Rothbard. I can hear my kids coming up from a movie. Let's see if I can finish real quick. So Murray Rothbard, again, very, very strongly political, but I love his point here. Quote, it is no crime to be ignorant of economics, which is, after all, a specialized discipline, and one that most people consider to be a dismal science, but it is totally irresponsible to have a loud and vociferous opinion on economic subjects while remaining in this state of ignorance. You are allowed to have opinions on economics. Everybody does, that's fine. But if you were loud and upset and angry and you haven't taken the time to study, then you are choosing to be ignorant. So 3 cheers for Murray Rothbard and ending our ignorance. I think that's great. 18, economists can't see the future. Well, the truth is, good economists won't claim to. A lot of people say that they want economists to figure out what's going to happen. We call this forecasting. My best response to this is a despair.com poster. If you haven't been to despair.com, you should absolutely go because it's so great. I love their little crystal ball here. It says, experts, we've got a talent for explaining tomorrow why the predictions we made yesterday didn't come true today. Good economics is not about predictions. Good economics is about explanations. And in particular, why do people do why do people do what they do the way that they do them? And what can we learn from that? Number 19. Economists agree that, no, homeboy, no, I promise you, no, they don't. On almost everything, economists do not agree. Even what I've shown you so far in just this little video. I'm guessing that if you showed it to 100 economists, a bunch of them would disagree with me, and that is completely okay. So I love this quote. Ask 5 economists and you'll get 5 different answers, 6 if one went to Harvard. Well, the reality is there's a lot of truth in that. But there is something that you should know, and what I am going to try and focus on in this class is the degree to which economists agree. So this is actually from my econ professor when I was in college, J.R. Curl. You can see his name right down here if you pause the video. Michael B. Vaughan, Richard M. Alston, and J.R. Curl. Is there consensus among economists in the 1990s? American Economic Review, May 1992. So he asked on a survey, what do you believe? I would love to do this in education, by the way. If any of you are smart, intelligent, thoughtful types, we should get together and do something similar. I think that would be super fun. He said, do you think that a ceiling on rents reduces the quantity and quality of housing available? And 93% of economists said yes. Do tariffs and import quotas usually reduce general economic welfare? And again, 93% of economists said yes. Flexible and floating exchange rates offer an effective international monetary arrangement. 90% said yes. There are, in fact, some things that economists agree on, and that's because we are following the data the best that we can. But if you were to say, should we have a minimum wage, you would find a lot more disagreement amongst economists, and that's okay, because economics is not an outcome science. It is a process science where we think very, very carefully, and because of that, we are made better off. Number 20, is economics a dismal science? This is a great little story, a great introduction to economics that all of you should know. Thomas Robert Malthus, we've named a group of people after them, the Malthusian thinkers. Famine seems to be the last, the most dreadful resource of nature. He said that because people were multiplying and we only had so much food, that the only natural, obvious course was that we were all going to starve. And that was why it was a dismal science, because economics showed so clearly that at some point we were all going to starve to death. I love what Greg Mankiw says about this. Well, first let me start with Paul Samuelson, one of the world's most famous economists. Economics never was a dismal science, but it should be a realistic one. Again, you can feel this positivist, empiricist, we are here to follow the data kind of a vibe in economics, and I think it really is what makes it great. Here's Greg Mankiw, the author of your textbook, and I love what he says about this. People consume resources. That's not good news. That means that we could all starve. And yet, they also produce resources. This is on a paper that he wrote called Be Fruitful and Multiply, where he talks about how he has just had his 3rd child, his son, and how some people would say, I can't believe you would do that, and how meaningful it was for him to have a 3rd child, and how that child could produce more resources in his lifetime than he will consume. As it turns out, the dismal part of the dismal science isn't all that dismal once you look at how productive human beings can be. So that, my friends, you don't need to read about all of that other stuff. That, my friends, are 20 myths and my answers to them about economics that you might have heard. God bless, and we'll talk soon. See you in the next video.